What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Next Man Up podcast. I'm your host, Ben and Crowley. I'm here with my co-host, Colin Martin. How
How
are
we
we
doing
doing
today?
today?
We're doing great. We're doing great. We got a lot to talk about. It's been a busy week in sports. Obviously, we got some NFL news. We're finally getting to the point where we have some NBA news. So we're going to talk about
Mhm.
that a little bit. But let's kick it off in the NFL. And I think the question on everybody's mind right now is how about them Cowboys?
Well, going into this week, as we've talked every single week, the Cowboys have looked good. They went up against the 49ers, a potential NFC championship matchup. I don't think that was out of the cards going into this week. And we saw Dak Prescott play his best football, his real football this week, with three interceptions to his name, only one touchdown. He said it was the most embarrassing, humbling game of his life. But, we saw the real Dak Prescott this week, and we got shown that the Cowboys are fraudulent once again, like we do every year. This was another game like we saw last year in the NFC or whatever NFC divisional round, whatever the playoffs were they played last year. They got beat last year. It was a little more funny, I guess. This year it was kind of different. They got embarrassed by 40 points last year. They just decided to run that play and run out the clock at the end of the game. Either way, the Cowboys just aren't that top tier team that Cowboys fans think they are. And I think they could come back from this and make the playoffs. But I mean, they got exposed on national TV, and Jerry Jones came out after and said that Dak Prescott's still the guy. He said that he could be a Super Bowl champion quarterback for them, which is like wrong. I think he's senile at this point. He has been for a few years. But with that out of the way, the Cowboys got shown what they really were. The 49ers showed that they were the best team in the NFL up to this point, and Cowboys are not legit.
Yeah, well, hear me out about the Cowboys. I'm just playing. The Cowboys simply cannot compete with the top dogs in the NFL right now. And when they got matched up against real competition, they got owned. I mean, we just saw it on live TV. They've been the 49ers' Lil Bro. I mean, shout out my boy Cam, Lil Bro. It's the Lil Bro of the NFL, is how the Cowboys are treated by the 49ers. And what did Albert Einstein say about insanity? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And that's what the Cowboys do by running back these different new and improved lineups that look the same every year. This Cowboys team is the same as last year, the same as the year before, the same as the year before that, the exact same team that they've had since they moved on from Tony Romo. It is the exact same team. I don't care if the players are different. They do the exact same things, and they get beat up when it really matters every year. They're not legit. And I can't believe people try to tell me the Cowboys are back every year. They're going to make the playoffs. I mean, hell, if they have a good year, they might win a game, but they're not Super Bowl contenders, and they won't be. I don't even hate Dak Prescott, but this team is not going to win a Super Bowl with him. I completely agree. Jerry Jones is going senile. Having this much faith in a guy like Dak Prescott is absolutely ridiculous when he's not even at a level much higher than some guys we'll talk about later, like Jordan Love. I mean, a little better than Love. We'll talk about that more later, but he's not like 5 tiers above him. I mean, they're kind of fighting over the same stuff here. Their defense is obviously really good, but with Diggs going out, I mean, they got shown up. I don't think Trayvon Diggs would have won him this game or anything, but Brock Purdy had a game without having to do a whole lot, and I think Diggs being out was a big part of that. Micah Parsons individually still one of the best defensive players in the league, but this defense needs more in the secondary. Even when they had Diggs, they needed more. The offense can't put it together. And even going against a run defense, which the 49ers have the best one in the league, you still couldn't get any of your backs going, including Tony Pollard, who I think is really good. So, like every other year, Cowboys good on paper. Will they compete when it comes time for the playoffs? Absolutely not. And we just saw it here.
Yeah. And I mean, when we're comparing these games, I know every NFL game's a little different, but when we're looking at scores and just box scores in general, I mean, the Giants put up a better fight than the Cowboys did against the 49ers. So, what does that tell you at the end of the day? This Cowboys team is really good. Defensively, they have one of the best players in the NFL in Micah Parsons. I like Micah Parsons, Penn State guy, but there is points where he definitely can be overrated already. I mean, people are putting him in this tier with guys like Myles Garrett, TJ Watt. I don't think he's there yet. I think he's probably a step below, which isn't a diss to him. He's a top 10 defensive player, top 25 player, at least in the NFL overall. It just happens that the position that he plays has the best overall players in the league with Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Aaron Donald, whoever else you want to talk about, Nick Bosa. Edge position is the deepest, best position in the NFL right now. And this Cowboys team is still good, but they're not a Super Bowl contender. As long as Dak Prescott is there, I don't care who you bring in every year. CeeDee Lamb can be there. Tony Pollard, who I like. I've been a fan of Tony Pollard the whole time he was there, and now he's finally getting a shot. But it seems like, I mean, last week he got absolutely blown up by that 49ers defense, one of the best in the league. Fred Warner had a amazing performance like he does every week, probably the best inside linebacker in the NFL right now by far. And overall, this team offensively, defensively, my main question going into this week, would Brock Purdy be able to handle the pressure from the Cowboys defense? And clearly he did. George Kittle, who hasn't really done anything in the past few years, had 3 touchdowns against them. He had a great game. And overall, I mean, this 49ers team just showed that they're on a different level. The only team that I would say could really compete with them right now in the NFC would be the Eagles, who are undefeated. They've had some bumps in the road. The 49ers seem like they're the only team in the NFL that hasn't had any bumps yet. But at the end of the day, still, Brock Purdy's the quarterback. He's been good, but I still think there's possibilities that he could go out and, mess up at some point.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with you there, but I've said this before, I'll say it again. When Brock Purdy is playing well, we both know the 49ers are the best team in the league. They just have the pieces everywhere else. And we talk about this all the time, being a system quarterback, being a game manager. That's all right when your team's good enough. I mean, we've seen it before. And if that's what Brock Purdy is going to do consistently, that's fine by me. He doesn't make great plays, but his offensive line is one of the best in the league, so he has time to throw. Best running back, one of the better receiving cores, one of the best tight ends. Defense is incredible. He doesn't need to do a whole lot. It's almost better that he's not, because it's just letting his playmakers do what they got to do. Not to mention, they're probably the best coach team in the NFL. It's either them or the Dolphins, depends who you ask. They check all the boxes. They're legit. And I think that's why I'm being so harsh on the Cowboys right now, because everyone's been trying to tell me that they're legit this year. Even after dropping a game to the Cardinals, everyone seems to think Dallas is this legit squad. And when you put them up against a team that we know is legit, they just get spanked. It was an unbelievably poor performance, and it has sold me on the fact that the Cowboys aren't ready to fight with the big dogs yet.
Yeah. And going from 2 historically great NFC teams to a historically great AFC team for a good while, about 20-year dynasty, is now definitely coming to an end. A lot have been saying that it's been over for a while. Still some people holding on to hope with Mac Jones, but my main question today, I'll give you probably the opposite end just from a non-biased standpoint, but I want to know, as a fan of the Patriots, I know it's kind of tough and it's kind of weird to say, is it time to get rid of Bill Belichick? But Robert Kraft has come out recently and he said that he doesn't really care about Bill Belichick going out on his own note. He was kind of asked about that. Does Bill Belichick not gain enough respect to go out on his own note, but should he be able to retire before he gets fired, essentially? And Robert Kraft said, no, basically he's on the end of the rope right now. And if they don't turn this around, Bill Belichick could easily get fired before the end of the season, it seems like right now. So I want to know, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, and if you want my honest opinion, I really just think it's time for Kraft to take away his GM duties. If that means you have to kick him out from the position in totality, I guess it's what you have to do. But in a perfect world, he stays the coach and isn't the GM anymore, because I really don't think coaching is the issue. It's we both know it's the talent at the end of the day. The defensive schemes are still really good. The Patriots had a top 10 defense in the league last year, and outside of Matthew Judon, there was no one on it. So that says enough for me to be confident about the coaching on that end. And the offense has flashes with absolutely no talent. Don't get me wrong, the offense is horrible, but they should be horrible. Look at the roster. The fact that they've even put up a decent amount of points in any of these games makes me think that Belichick is doing something right, or at least the guys he's employing at offensive coordinator and the assistants are. So with that being said, I really hope that Kraft takes the GM ability away from Belichick. But if Belichick is sought and absolutely set in stone that he wants to be the head coach and the GM, I think Kraft has to do what he has to do. And on the other end, if Bill hangs it up and he retires, he's still going down as 100% the best coach of all time. Let's not let that go out the window because of some bad seasons in order. But if New England decides they're going to bring in a QB this year, they actually commit to it. They're done with Mac Jones. I also understand if they think the best decision is to bring in a new head coach. I can see it going either way. I prefer if Belichick stays around because I still think he's a good coach. I think he has a lot of good things going on. I think the staff is well put together. But if they're going to allow him to put together a mediocre roster year after year, we even saw it towards the tail end of Brady's career, then I don't really know what you're going to do here. And it puts Kraft and Patriots fans like myself in a really difficult spot.
Yeah, I mean, going into this season, I know a lot of people around us, I kind of caught a little bit of flack saying that even though they're getting this new offensive coordinator and Bill O'Brien coming back to the team, that they might be worse with him. And I know a lot of Patriots fans had the belief that he would be able to come in. He's worked with Mac Jones before, but clearly he's not a good offensive coordinator at this point. There's a reason that he got ran out of Bama, the worst offense that they've had in a while, with the best quarterback that they've had since Joe Namath at this point, arguably probably the best quarterback that they've had at Alabama, just college wise, career wise. And I mean, they went out and they signed guys like Juju and Devontae Parker. Juju, a near 1,000-yard receiver last year on the Chiefs. He's done it a lot of years before. Devontae Parker, a great guy in the slot. Maybe not number one receivers overall, but continuing to build up guys like Mike Gesicki too in that tight end room. So there's definitely weapons. I don't think they have the worst receiving room in the NFL. There's definitely other teams that you could throw out there. I mean, even overall, if we're looking at, they would be pretty comparable to, I think, a team like the Giants at this point. The Giants have guys pretty similar in that role. But either way, I think the Patriots, it's definitely time for Bill Belichick to at least give up that general manager role, like you said. I think if that comes with firing him as the coach, because I don't know if he's able to get rid of that GM role without being the coach. He's not a good general manager. I think we both know this. His draft decisions when Brady was there and the team was good, it kind of just slid under the rug. It didn't really matter because they were able to bring in those top end free agents every year. Tom Brady called up whoever he wanted to. They pretty much got a new top end receiver every single year. But now, when Tom Brady's not there, I mean, the draft mistakes have really come back to get them. They went at a point where Robert Kraft arguably kind of ruined the end of this team because it seemed like, from what we know, overall, it seemed like Belichick wanted to keep Garoppolo and kind of let him play into that role. But Robert Kraft wanted to keep Brady towards the end of his career and continue to hold on to that. So it seems like Belichick, I mean, we don't know exactly where they would be at this point, but I think it's pretty fair to say that Jimmy Garoppolo would be doing a lot better than Mac Jones at this point. I mean, we even see it on the Raiders now. We saw it on the 49ers. So I think in the end, it was probably the right idea to rebuild at that point, but Kraft didn't want to get rid of Brady, and Brady left on his own terms. So, I mean, that kind of blew up in his face, and now he's taking it out on Bill Belichick. I think Belichick is towards the end of his career. He's 71 at this point, and I wouldn't say that it's disrespectful to fire him at this point. It's a business at the end of the day, and it does put a little damper on him. But in 15 years, when we look back, no one's going to remember that Bill Belichick, if you're looking at the history books, got fired as in a bad season with Mac Jones. No one's going to remember that. Mac Jones will not be remembered as a Patriots legend in 15 years. You can write that down. I'm pretty confident with that take overall. And I think in the end, I think it's just time. You got to go with a new guy. You got to go with a young offensive minded coach. I mean, you have a good defense. So overall, just get a new young guy. I think that's the way.
Yeah, and I completely understand that. And to be honest with you, I agree. But one thing I want to throw out there is we know the Patriots drafting woes. It's bad, right? The best Patriots players of all time have been late draft picks that they got super lucky with, right? We both know that. But the thing that really frustrates me the most about the post Brady Belichick era is the signings. I mean, look at the signings that the Patriots have made. They're few and far between, but outside of Judon, it's horrible. I mean, the biggest thing for me is that Belichick and the whole Patriots staff will bring guys in on big deals the with the expectation of them not playing. I mean, this gets me kind of heated up. I'm trying not to yell on here, but the Juju Smith-Schuster signing is the worst signing out of any team this offseason. You bring Juju in on good receiver money, which on paper and what we've seen from his past production, he deserves, and the Patriots won't give him the ball. It absolutely infuriates me. Demario Douglas is a really good receiver. I'm glad he's getting play time, but the fact that he is your target over a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster, who you just gave tens of millions of dollars to, absolutely kills me as a fan, because at that point, that's Jacoby Myers money. And we've seen Jacoby Myers succeed in the Patriot system his whole career. That would have been a great re-signing, and I'm guaranteeing you Jacoby Myers would have been really good up till this point of the season. Instead, there's overpaid Juju, who I'm sure would be good if he played, but he's sitting on the bench or he's run blocking instead of actually getting targets, while Demario Douglas goes off and has pretty solid games. And Kendrick Bourne, his first year with the Patriots, emerges as a stud receiver. He actually builds chemistry with Mac Jones. Mac Jones, the quarterback who can't build chemistry with any offensive target ever. Even at college, he couldn't build chemistry with his best receivers. That's why he spread the ball around so much. That's why guys didn't like him. I mean, I'm being honest with you. Mac Jones can't build chemistry with anybody. He finally builds it with Kendrick Bourne. The next season, he doesn't play. This year, it feels like he hasn't got a target since week 2. It's just absolutely infuriating. Belichick cannot build a good team to save his life. Brady is the best player of all time. It worked out well then, but since Brady has left, it's not going to happen. So just to reiterate my point one more time, so it's exceptionally clear, Belichick is not a good GM. He has to go in that, right? If that means taking him out, as you mentioned, then that's got to be what it is, because it's just disappointment after disappointment for Patriots fans. I'm being honest with you guys. It's hard for me to take it anymore. And there's some guys that we'll mention that are coming up on the trade deadline. Will the Patriots be movers and actually try to build their squad here? Are they going to start selling the team? Who knows? But I think it's something important to talk about. So with that being said, as I mentioned, the trade deadline is coming up. There's some names on the chopping block that we're going to talk about right here. Out of these guys that we have listed down, who do you think will be moved? Where do you think they'll go? All of that.
Yeah, so just a few guys to start off. Guys like Brian Burns, who's potentially going to be up there. The Panthers not having a great year this year. I would say one of the big targets for him, definitely the Patriots at this point. Would you like to see him, a guy like that, on the Patriots? Also, kind of throwing in other names like that, Danielle Hunter, that we've seen too, and potentially another guy for the Patriots, Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I'll start with Brian Burns. I would love if the Patriots got Brian Burns, because we talked about this before. I mean, Judon's one of the best pass rushers in the league. He's exceptional, but he's hurt and he's older. They're going to need to address that in other places. I like Josh Uche, but he's never going to be the number one pass rusher on a team. That's not really his vibe. So, of course, Brian Burns would be great, but we both know Brian Burns is exceptional. His price tag is going to be really high. So I think that depends on what it looks like there. Danielle Hunter, I mean, I really like Hunter. He's definitely had problems with the Vikings in the last couple of years, especially with contract stuff. But a team I really like him in, especially with a scheme fit, would be the Jaguars. Obviously, investing in Trayvon Walker, he's kind of played as more of an off-ball guy. I think they still need help in that front seven. We saw with Calais Campbell and other previous Jaguars interior/edge rushers that they're good at revitalizing guys kind of later into their career. I think Danielle Hunter could be that guy. He seems like he would fit well, and maybe he doesn't bring back Saxonville, but he's another premier defensive lineman I think Jacksonville would utilize really well. When it comes to Kirk Cousins, no. He's definitely a better player than Mac Jones, don't get me wrong, but my opinion on Kirk Cousins is I don't think he's getting traded at the deadline. Trading for a quarterback, any quarterback at the trade deadline, is really difficult for a team, especially in the Patriots case where it doesn't seem like they'll be competing. And if I'm a Vikings, if I'm someone that works with the Vikings, I know fans would like to see him go because it's value, but realistically, you have a quarterback that you have a lot of money invested to, playing probably one of his best individual seasons since you acquired him. It's going to be tough to move on from him at that point. You got to get fans in the stands, and Kirk is playing well, even with Justin Jefferson out for the foreseeable future. I think that's going to be tough to trade, especially, it's tough to trade any player at the deadline because they have to learn a whole new playbook. I think it's not valuable for Kirk to get half of a season of the Patriots or half a season of a team like the Jets. I just don't think that works for either party there. So I'm going to say no. But looking at some other names, guys like Derrick Henry, Devontae Adams, maybe these guys that are a little bit, more star-studded than some of the guys we just mentioned. Do you think we're going to see any blockbuster trades with those guys? And where do you think we might find them ending up?
Well, I think just going back to the Kirk Cousins point, I think at this point,
Okay.
with the Vikings being bad, they're 1-4. Justin Jefferson's going to miss at least 4 weeks. The top receiver on the team. I think you just have to tank for the rest of the season at this point. They're clearly not getting anywhere. Even with Kirk Cousins playing very well, this defense is holding them back. He can get 40 points a game. He can throw 5 touchdowns. It doesn't matter because the defense will let up at least one more point than he gets for them. So at the end of the season, you're going to give up a guy who has pretty high value right now in a quarterback sense, just because he's playing so well. And some teams will definitely be able to go out there and get him. I mean, a team maybe like the Patriots would be able to benefit from having him for however long the rest of his contract is right now. Even other teams would probably target him at this point. And I mean, on the other end too, a lot of other guys, Devontae Adams / Hunter Renfrow, pretty much anyone in that Raiders team overall, besides a guy like Michael Mayer, Jacoby Myers, it seems like any of those receivers. I don't know if they'll get traded. I mean, a guy like Devontae Adams could benefit from going to a team with a young quarterback like Jordan Love. I mean, Devontae Adams on the Packers would be cool to see. That would be a great trade for him to go over there. I don't think that'll actually happen. I don't see him going back, but I think that definitely if he does get traded, they would be interested in him going back. It would be interesting to see what the logistics of that would be, just because of what happened getting rid of him the first time. But I think he could go to a number of teams at this point. I don't know exactly how high his trade value would be, just because I feel like a guy like him, who's still at the top of his game, he is older than a lot of these young receivers that we see kind of blossom into top 10 receivers in their first few years. Another guy that I do want to throw out that I think will get traded at the deadline is Chase Young. It seems like he's been on the block for his whole career almost. Outside of his rookie season, it seems like with his injuries, the Commanders have been looking to get rid of him. He's one of those guys that looked like he could be one of the best defenders in the NFL after his rookie year, dealt with some injuries, some contract disputes, and it seems like with them not taking the 5th-year option, I think he's on his way out. And a lot of good teams could benefit from getting a guy like him. He's been linked to the Patriots, other teams, like you said, that could use an edge, Jacksonville, and he definitely still, I mean, he's an athletic, big guy. He definitely has the potential to become one of the best defenders on the edge in the NFL. I think he just needs a new scenario, a new scene.
Yeah, fair enough there. And I'm going to bring us back to a point that I know you want to talk about. You mentioned him earlier, and that's going to be Jordan Love. He's kind of been wishy-washy in his first couple weeks for Green Bay. Didn't look great last week. And I think the question is floating around if he's really the answer in Green Bay in the post-Rodgers era. So with that on the table, I'm just going to ask you straight up. Is Jordan Love the answer for the Packers?
Yeah, I think wishy-washy, you're being very nice there. The first 2 games, he looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. 6 touchdowns, no picks, 118 QBR. But the last 3 weeks, I mean, tells you everything else. 2 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and a 56 QBR. That is a complete drop-off that we've seen. And so far, I mean, those first 2 weeks looked very good against Chicago, against Atlanta. But then recently, it has just completely fallen off. I mean, that game against New Orleans wasn't terrible. He had 1 pick and 1 touchdown overall, but against Detroit, he couldn't get it done. Against the Raiders, could not get it done too. There was a good amount of drops there, but he could not get out of the pocket. It was just Max Crosby was just coming down his throat at that point on every single play. I mean, he was getting pressure in there the whole entire game, and he was hitting him in the face repeatedly. And overall, I mean, that offensive line didn't really do much for him. But at the end of the day, he only got sacked twice. So whether that's him evading or not, it was pretty obvious that they didn't want to call passing plays that game. He only threw the ball 30 times, and it seemed like they ran on first and second down pretty much every single time. And then they only let him throw on third downs or maybe some deep balls that we saw to Christian Watson. That one play itself kind of saved the game for them. If that never happened, it probably would have been even worse for them. And overall, I mean, that's where most of his yards came from, that 80-yard pass. At the end of the day, he had 182 yards. So really only 100 yards outside of that one throw. I don't know exactly what's going to go on with him. I think he does need a little bit more time, but if he continues to play like this, I think there's a lot of question marks around him, but I think he's still young enough where he could definitely bounce back.
Yeah, and you know I'm a Jordan Love supporter. I think if anyone's seen any of our other videos, I talk about it pretty much every week, it feels like. I'm not worried about him, if I'm being honest with you. That last game was pretty bad, but with Aaron Jones going down early, I mean, in Jordan Love scouting, my favorite thing about him was how he did the play action. He's an incredible play action passer. He sells it really well, and he just works well in that scheme. Without Aaron Jones being there and with AJ Dillon having another pretty disappointing season in my book, it just didn't open up that that part of the game. So Jordan Love played bad outside of that, don't get me wrong, but I think you take away a lot of what he does really well when you have a running back go down and your running attack doesn't look as stout. But that's just a small thing. At the end of the day, he's still not playing his best football. And I think this is more about the Packers offense than it does about him specifically. I mean, look at his receiver core. We've talked about it before. We both like Christian Watson, but we know that receiving core is not legit. They don't have any real weapons in there that have developed yet. I think Watson will get to that point. I don't think we're there yet. And the offensive line historically has been really good, but it's kind of fallen apart a little bit, especially on that right side. And with Bakhtiari having injury struggles, it feels like every year. He hasn't had them yet, knock on wood, but it seems like something that happens in his old age. It happens to a lot of linemen. I think you got to build that aspect up as well. I think Jordan Love showed off in his first 2 weeks why he's going to be the answer in Green Bay. So despite going through a tough stretch towards, this early middle of the season, I think you still have to bank on that potential. They've kept him around for a reason. They drafted him with Aaron Rodgers sticking around for a reason. They like him and they think he can be the guy for the future. If you bail on him, then you're bailing on your offense because you have so many more questions in that aspect. You have more questions in your interior defense as well. There's just a lot of boxes you have yet to check that you still need to. We knew this Packers team wasn't going to be competitive. We knew they weren't going to be very good, if we're being honest. So we shouldn't get on them too early about them not looking good. I think while Jordan Love has ran into this wall, I think he is going to break through it. I'm not worried about that. So even if this season isn't great, we got to remember this is essentially still his rookie year. So he's got a lot of things to figure out. And I have no problems with him going through a tough stretch because I'm convinced he is still the quarterback that I was super happy to watch at Utah State.
Yeah. And going in a little bit of a different direction to end the episode today. Recently, we saw the 2023-2024 NBA GM survey. Every year, these come out, kind of just a few different questions that they ask. Who's the favorite for MVP to win the title? Some other questions in there, rookie of the year. So I'm just going to go through some of these. I kind of want to get a few reactions. We can talk about a few of them and then just breeze through this real quick. So starting off, the favorite to win the title. The Nuggets and the Celtics both take 33% of the votes this year. The Bucks, who obviously got Dame, at 23% right now, and then the bottom two teams, the Suns and the Clippers, taking 7% and 3% respectively. How do you react to this? Kind of seeing the GMs even after the Dame trade, not having the Bucks as the favorite.
Yeah, and I don't take it super serious. I mean, NBA GMs, they definitely rely on consistency. And although the Celtics haven't won anything in a while, they're consistently fighting for the finals. Obviously, Denver won it last year. I think there's going to be a lot of GMs that aren't super bought into this Dame trade, especially compared to the fans, because, they're around basketball. They have biases to their own teams. So, we see the Celtics high up on this list every year. It's not something I take super seriously, but it's nice to see the GMs, bank on the teams that have been doing it recently. So I understand.
Yeah, I'm with you there too. A lot of those teams, all pretty high end, and obviously there's a lot that goes on during the season. Talking about individual players though, for the MVP, we saw Nikola Jokic get 43% of the votes, Giannis with 20, Jason Tatum with 13, and Luka Doncic with 10. I mean, these four guys, obviously Embiid won last year, but these four guys in probably the top 4 out of the 5 guys the past few years to be the favorite. So do you think Jokic is going to go out there and get his third MVP, or do you think that one of these guys like Tatum or Luka will finally break through and get their MVP?
Yeah, and based on what I've seen, it's going to be tough for me to pick anyone but a guy like Jokic or Giannis. Once again, we've seen him do it before. It's so early. This is not my final pick or anything, but it feels like a year Giannis will go out and prove himself. Even with Damian Lillard, it's going to allow him to play his best type of game with another floor spacer. I think he'll show that he's one of the best players in basketball, so I completely understand that. But I do want to swing this back to you. Obviously, Embiid, the reigning MVP, he's not in this top 4. He would be in the 5th spot, I'm guessing. What do you make of this? Having guys like Jason Tatum and Luka Doncic who really haven't proven they're at that very top level yet ahead of a guy like Embiid.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, we're not giving out official predictions here, but I mean, overall, I'm not surprised that Embiid isn't on here with all the question marks going around with the Sixers right now. I completely agree that I wouldn't say that Embiid, I still think he's one of the best players in the NBA, but I can see where they're coming from. Jason Tatum and Luka Doncic, both young guys that, especially with Luka's scenario with Kyrie next to him. He's going to get a lot of opportunity to shoot the ball. Kyrie kind of coming into that two role, even though he's really more of the traditional point guard. I think the offense runs through Luka at the end of the day. Jason Tatum, too, another guy who's expecting to take another step up into that superstar status this year. So I'm not surprised that he's not on there overall. But I mean, at the end of the day, still one of the best players in the league. He may still have got a good percentage of the votes. We don't really know. That they only listed the top four guys, so he could have 9% next to Luka. They didn't show it on here, so I don't really know at the end of the day. But some rookies too that I want to talk about. Victor Wembanyama got 50% of the votes here for Rookie of the Year. Scoot Henderson with 27%, Chet with 20%. I know a lot of people kind of almost forgetting that this will be his rookie year after last year. Overall, what do you who do you think will come out of this pack here?
Yeah, and I think Victor's at one to no surprise, and it's a good pick. I mean, we talked about opportunities a lot, and when it comes to opportunities with the ball in his hand, Victor's going to have more than anybody else. Don't get me wrong, Scoot Henderson's going to get to run the helm, and he is a really good guard. I was super high on him, I should say. But Anthony Simons is still there. Jeremy Grant is still there. You still have guys that need their touches and deservingly so. Victor doesn't really have that. I like Keldon Johnson. I think Devin Vassell just got a really good deal. I think he's going to have a good year, but Victor is probably going to be their number one option off the rip. Chet is great, but we have SGA who is going to be fighting for that MVP conversation, whether he's a serious contender or not. And just guys like Jalen Williams, Josh Giddey, there's guys that are going to hit the ball more than him. So it's going to be tough. What really intrigued me here, and I know you didn't bring it up, it's a very low percentage, but Sasha Vencikov for Sacramento with 3%. What a weird name there. I mean, obviously he's a guy coming from the EuroLeague. He was not a draft pick. He was signed. It's going to be his rookie NBA year. And to see that's at least two GMs that voted for him, seeing him get some credit, and I'm assuming neither of them were the Sacramento GM. I don't think they're allowed to do that, but who knows? Just seeing a guy like him get some respect. I mean, he's a guy that's definitely flown under the radar, a guy that neither of us have really talked about much. So they're expecting big things from him off the rip. Obviously, my pick is going to be Victor early, but if a guy like Sasha Vencikov actually ends up cracking the starting rotation for a Kings team, shout out to these GMs because that would be a great pick.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up too after I wasn't sure
Yeah.
exactly. And overall, I mean, it is interesting because I don't really know if you can vote for your own player, but based off the percentages, we do see that one general manager did vote for him. So it would be interesting depending on who it is. But like you said, I mean, 28 years old and arguably already in his prime of his career at this point off the EuroLeague MVP. We've seen players play very well there, come in immediately like Luka. So a fun name to throw out there. It would be interesting. Some other guys too, talking about the draft quickly. They voted on the biggest steal. We saw Cam Whitmore kind of come away with that 43%, not really surprising. And other guys within that 10-ish percent, Keontae George, Scoot Henderson, even guys like Brandon Podziemski, who I talked about before, made a video about that before, a great pickup for Golden State. So overall, I guess outside of Cam Whitmore, who do you think would be the biggest steal? Maybe another guy that's not listed on here overall too.
Yeah, for sure. And Cam Whitmore, I mean, it's kind of obvious if you watch my draft stuff. He was my fourth prospect in the whole draft. So huge steal there. I think Podziemski is a great pick. I know that's your guy. And I think based on his draft stock and how high he was climbing, the Warriors being able to pick him up of all teams, really, really good. Another biased pick I'll talk about a little bit because I really liked him coming out of Xavier is Colby Jones. He was originally drafted by the Celtics. After about 5 trades, he ends up on Sacramento now. I don't think he'll have an immediate impact this year. Probably wouldn't have been a vote for a lot of people, but I think he's the most NBA ready second round pick by far, even more so than some of the first round guys. He spends a year in the G League. He could honestly come and make an impact for Sacramento right away. I know I just mentioned Sasha, but I think Colby Jones might be even better of a prospect, even though he's quite younger and obviously doesn't have a EuroLeague MVP under his belt. So big Colby Jones guy. Jordan Walsh, as a Celtics fan, looks like he'll get some minutes this year. But I think both of our guys are the picks here, being Whitmore and Podziemski.
Yeah, another name to throw out to Ryan Rupert, who was drafted in the second round overall. I know a great guy right there. He probably won't see the court for the Blazers this year, but get a lot of good play time in the G League. Talking about defenders, the best defender this year voted. Giannis got 40% of the votes. Drew Holiday with 13%. Draymond, Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson with 10% each, and Kawhi Leonard with 7%. I guess the big headline here, Bam Adebayo was kind of left off of this list overall. little interesting to see as he was one of the best defenders in the NBA overall. And I think overall, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day what the GMs vote for. But I guess a little interesting to keep him off of here and put a guy like Kawhi, who's still obviously one of the best players in the NBA, but he doesn't really play. He's getting older. So kind of interesting there overall.
Yeah, for sure. And I would have liked to see a guy like Jared Allen get some respect here. But at the end of the day, you look at the list, you just named off the guys. We know those are some of the best defenders in basketball. Can't be too mad about that. I mean, for a lot of these guys, they're really just thinking of the top tier elite defenders. They're going to pick guys that have proven to do it before. I think that's really the theme I see with a lot of these GM polls year after year. They're not making any scorching hot takes. They're just picking the guys we know will perform. So when I see guys like Giannis, Holiday, Smart, even Draymond, makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and finally going off the most unpredictable season, 30% of the votes went to the Sixers, which completely makes sense. You can talk about that in a minute. Next off, we have the Mavericks, the Thunder, the Pelicans, the Suns, and the Clippers all around that 13 to 10%. So a lot of these teams kind of in the area. Obviously, the Sixers with that James Harden trade, depending on what they get in return, could make them close to a title favorite if they do end up with one of those big stars. Even with a good bench, I still think they're very competitive. Other teams on here, though, like the Mavericks, the Thunder, the Pelicans, the Suns, and the Clippers, all very good teams overall with some young pieces. But like we've seen the past few years, if Shea can make that MVP run that we've been talking about the past year and a half, that obviously would boost the Thunder up into a big team. The Clippers, too. I mean, we've seen what happens with them if they play healthy, one of the best teams in the NBA, but we haven't seen that. Maybe with the new rules this year, we'll see something happen. I know the Sixers are the number one team on here. So is there anyone else you really want to outline besides them? Because I think we both know the main
Yeah.
questions around them.
Yeah, I mean, I won't talk too much about the Sixers. Obviously, it's your squad and we know the questions. I think the Thunder are a great pick because based on all these teams, I think we know what their roster looks like the most, but it's really young and we don't know how legit some of these guys are. We could see a guy like Shea take a step back, or we could see a guy like Josh Giddey take a huge step forward. Not even to mention Chet, who we talked about earlier. I think they have a solidified roster. They know their direction, but does that direction lead them to like a top 4 seed in the West, like some have predicted? Or still in that lottery. I especially in the West, which is very, very competitive. It's kind of hard for me to tell what their ceiling or floor is. So that would have been my pick here. Obviously, we know the Sixers questions, but I think the Thunder are a team I'm really unsure about at this point.
Yeah. And kind of just ending off on that. Overall, we're going to see a lot of question marks around a lot of teams this year. Like we said, we kind of went over what the NBA GMs had to say. Within the next week or two before the season starts, you'll see what we have to predict for the season. Most of our predictions probably going to be wrong, like we've seen with our NFL predictions. But if we get some right, obviously we'll come on there and talk about that. So we'll see that then. Next week, we'll be back with some more news in the NBA and the NFL. And until then, we'll see you.
See you guys.